Hola, buen dia. It's me, Peppermint. And when I'm not on RuPaul's Drag Race or simply being New York City's sweetest diva, I'm tuned into the fabulously empowering Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour, coming to you every weeknight at 7 p.m. live from our good old friends at the BRCSJ Virtual HQ via their Facebook page. Tune in tonight.
Need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour. Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in-between time to our friends in in-between spaces. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters of the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert Seda Schreiber. I'm the chief activist here at the center, and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past 15 months. We've been live every single weeknight, over 350 some odd shows, many of them, my friends, very odd indeed. Tonight is the last night of Pride, but it is not the last vestige of Pride. Pride is not a moment, it's a movement. Pride is not a month, it's a feeling. Pride is time for us to celebrate together all year long, to dance in celebration and to march in solidarity. So this may be the end of June, this may be the end of Pride Month, but it's not the end of Pride, my friends, and we're going to continue on. So welcome to the Power Hour, and welcome to a very special night, because we are always thrilled to have our, I dare say, old friend Adam Gopnik with us, with who I will say without hesitation, one of the greatest thinkers of our modern era, and always a thrill to have him on the show. And by the way, I have to nap during the day, because I have to keep my brain fresh, because there's so much of my synapses that need to fire while I'm talking to Adam to keep up with the conversation. So I hope that I'm up to the verbal boxing ring that I'm about to enter into. But before we do that, we do have a couple of things we want to talk about, because I know that Adam brings a whole bunch of friends and readers and fans and fam to the show every time he comes to the yard. So we want you to come back to us. As I said at the outset, we are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single freaking weeknight. So we want you to be with us in virtual community, my friends. Otherwise, we're just shouting into the wind. So please do join us back. And to give you some incentive, here are some of the things we do have coming up on the Power Hour. Tomorrow night, we have a wonderful conversation with Tamara Winfrey Harris, the author of Dear Black Girl, a book of affirmations. Can't wait to be inspired by Tamara. Friday night is the first Friday folk concert that we do every first Friday. We bring you some folk, and I am a new convert to that genre of music due to our old friend David Brahinsky. This time he's bringing some friends. Guy DeRosa and Noemi Bolton is going to be with him. So we're looking forward to a great concert to kind of ease us in to the Independence Day weekend. And speaking of Independence Day or lack thereof, thrilled to have Adam Sir on the show, whose book Cruelty is the Point, The Past, Present, and Future of Trump's America just came out this week. So we're going to have a really incredible conversation on Independence Day with Adam. Looking forward to that. We have so many smart Adams on the show. Then we have Shannon Watts, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense America founder. Can't get better than that, right? Run. This is the last book of the March trilogy, The Life of John Lewis, and who better to be with us than Andrew Aiden, who was an aide to the Honorable John Lewis. I'm looking forward to that, and to having Andrew back. Anita Diamant, author of The Red Tent, of course, and her new book, Period, End of Sentence, a new chapter in the fight for menstrual justice. This is a subject we have not dealt with enough on the Power Hour, so looking forward to having Anita on the show to talk about that. And then we're doing our Throwback Thursdays. During Pride Month, we had Throwback Thursdays where we brought back wonderful guests, meaningful moments from the show past, rebroadcasting some really wonderful things that we've had on, wonderful folks that we've had on. So we're going to continue that tradition in July. Throwback Thursdays featuring such luminaries as Valerie Jarrett, Patton Oswalt, and Wayne Brady. And that's just some of the stuff that is coming up on the Power Hour. So please be here with us because we are here for you. Last but not least, before we bring Adam on, and I hate to wait any longer, but there is something special that happened tonight. Just at the end of Pride Month, not the end of Pride, as I mentioned, but the end of Pride Month, Biography Channel, History Channel, did an incredible little biography of Bayard Rustin himself and honored us by allowing us to collaborate, help them with some of the language, and also include us in this delightful video. So if you will indulge, please, before we bring on our illustrious guest to the Power Hour, let's watch this great video that's been playing during Pride Month on the Biography Channel and the History Channel, and will continue to play throughout their showings of all sorts of wonderful programming. So without further ado.
The most consequential social justice movements of the 20th century were guided by a Black, gay pacifist, a man who overcame countless challenges in the fight for equal rights. Biography, You Need to Know. Bayard Rustin's commitment to nonviolent protest was rooted in his Quaker upbringing, and it bloomed when he introduced the principle to his friends in the burgeoning civil rights movement. A master organizer, Rustin planned the March on Washington, bringing hundreds of thousands of people to D.C. to demand civil rights laws. But as an openly gay man, Rustin faced discrimination from his adversaries as well as his peers. Yet Rustin turned these obstacles into action, and he joined the LGBTQ+ movement to fight for gay rights. And today, his lifetime of activism lives on at the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. You need to know Bayard Rustin.
You do need to know Bayard Rustin. You do need to know Bayard Rustin. You do. And how about that little cartoon of our former headquarters? Well, we'll talk about that some other time. But we are so thrilled and honored that Biography and History Channel chose to partner with us and collaborate with us on that video, to have a little cartoon house of our center and to bring Bayard's message and his mission and what we do each and every day here at the center. So I hope that you enjoyed that, and that'll be playing in perpetuity on the Biography Channel and the History Channel. So thrilling and so honored to be a part of their important work. And speaking of important work, and speaking of being honored, Adam Gopnik has been writing for the New Yorker since 1986, folks, even during his time in Paris when he wrote for the Paris Journal. Whilst there, he also wrote the delightful Paris to the Moon, then came The King in the Window, Through the Children's Gate, A Home in New York, Angels and Ages, a short book about Lincoln Darwin and modern life, Winter, 5 Winters on the Season, The Table Comes First, and At the Stranger's Gate, Arrivals in New York, among many others, if you can believe it. His most recent work, 1,000 Small Sanities, The Moral Adventures of Liberalism, takes the form of a long letter to his daughter and is truly one of the most thoughtful and thought-provoking things I have ever read. No doubt, no diggity. He's also worked on many musical projects as well as a lyricist and libretto writer, and he's actually not a bad guitar player. Adam has won 3 National Magazine Awards for essay and for criticism, and the George Polk Award for magazine reporting, as well as the Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters. I have to take a breath. I could literally spend the next hour sharing Adam's bona fides, but rather let's spend some time with the man himself, as he is literally one of my favorite people whom I have never actually met. And not because of all that cool stuff I just mentioned, but because he says and writes things like this, quote, Writing well is not just a question of winsome expression, but having found something big and true to say and having found the right words to say it in, of having seen something large and having found the right words to say it small enough to enter an individual mind so that the strong ideas of what the words are saying sounds like sweet reason. Sweet reason indeed. Something we could all use a little more of now and in the future. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming someone we are extraordinarily proud to have as a regular guest on our Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour, the OG radical of the real, Adam Gopnik, folks. Adam, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's always, Robert, just a joy to be with you. Cold weather and hot, but I have a big question to ask you, which that lovely piece from Biography brings to mind is it Bayard or Bayard?
So it is Bayard. Bayard is what
I've always said Bayard, right? Yeah.
That's what Walter Nadel, his partner, who humble brag is board member emeritus here at the center and lends his name and his reputation to the work that we do and believes so strongly. And one of the first questions I asked him is the same question. And he said, it is Bayard Rustin. Bayard is the preferred pronunciation.
Good, because we heard Bayard there in that lovely tribute. I thought, oh my God, I've been saying it wrong.
No. Out of all the language I gave them, they never asked me for pronunciation. I wish I, but still a wonderful little piece. And
wonderful little tribute to you and your cause as to him. And as always, as we've said a million times before, I never come to the end of Bayard Rustin for writing letter. I keep his letters by my bedside. Nothing could be more appropriate, right, than here just at the end of Pride Week that we talk about Mr. Rustin yet again, because one of the things is, as that little piece suggested, exemplified, that makes him so interesting is his double life, both as a black man and as a gay man, and how those two struggles for recognition, for social justice, both were joined in his life, and in some ways were separated in his life by the force of circumstances. It always makes me think hard about the nature of gay experience in America, about what it means to be part of Pride Week. I'm not gay myself, but my life has been in myriad ways deeply entangled with gay men and women, with gay experience. And it's something that I think we never come to the end of thinking about. One of the things that I was contemplating, thinking of our conversation tonight, Robert, is that gayness, homosexuality, whatever we want to call it, is one of the real constants in human experience. Any society we go to at any period in human history, a significant proportion of the human beings in that society experience same-sex attraction. That's their fundamental sexual orientation, their fundamental erotic orientation, and also their fundamental, what should we call it, connubial orientation, both whom they're attracted to as a lover, but also whom they're attracted to as a mate or partner. And it's fascinating to try and study all the ways in which that unchangeable piece of what I will not hesitate to call human nature gets channeled, repressed, oppressed, liberated, emancipated in so many different ways. I just wrote a long piece, Robert, for the New Yorker, and where I am, as we sometimes joke, I'm like a sharecropper. I can only buy and sell at the store. I can't write for anyone else. And when I see all of your one, Adam Serwer, is that the pronunciation?
Yeah.
Who writes such wonderful stuff for the Atlantic, and I've got his book here, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I wrote a long piece about someone who would seem to be a long way away from our concerns as when we think about Pride Week, and that's Marcel Proust, the great French symbolist, aesthete, and writer. And I had always known, I'd always known that Proust was gay, and we can go back and forth about when that title is appropriate, when homosexuality is recognized, all that stuff. But he was. What I hadn't known, and sort of totally swiveled my mind around and thinking about Proust, who is stereotyped as an effeminate, limp-wristed gay man, was that he fought a duel, an actual duel, Robert, with guns and pistols after he felt that he had been libeled for being gay. Now, that may seem like a contradiction, right? Like he's denying his identity. But in fact, the man he felt had libeled him was also gay and known to be so. And what offended Proust, mortally offended Proust, wasn't the accusation of homosexuality, which was part of his life. It was the narrow labeling as a parasite, as someone lacking in spine and purpose, someone who wasn't brave enough to propose a duel. And he actually did it. He actually did it to make it plain that whatever his sexual orientation, to use a term that they didn't have then, but we use now, whatever his sexual orientation, it did not in any way affect his courage, his bravery, his audacity. And he challenged this very unpleasant kind of Gawker-style journalist to a duel, and they fought it with pistols in the Fontainebleau forest on one smoky French morning. And they both fired at each other, and they both, fortunately for literature, they both missed. Well, fortunately for literature, that the guy shooting at Proust missed. I don't know if it was as fortunate the other direction. Anyway, I was astonished, excuse me, to read this story, and I didn't get to include it in the piece I wrote for the New Yorker because there were so many elements. You know, writing one of those pieces is like wrestling with a squid. You know, you're trying to get one tentacle down. And I wanted to raise it tonight because I think it is a significant story. I think it is a significant story because it reminds us that the struggle for gay rights is also a struggle for the spectrum of gay experience. It's exactly the same struggle that we attempt at whatever point on the spectrum of identity we find ourselves. And that is a struggle not just to be proud of who we are and what we inescapably must be, but also to affirm our own possibilities. To be gay is not to be one thing or another. It can be to be gloriously and flamboyant. It can be to be just the opposite. The spectrum and the range of gay experience is as broad, it seems to me, as any other kind of experience. And one of the things that is so important, and I see your good Cynthia is pointing out, yeah, it's one of the issues is outing others, right? One of the things that we still struggle with, right, is who has the right to out somebody else. And Proust's feeling is I'm perfectly glad to be the person I am with the lovers I have, but it's not your role to point your finger at me and say, and label me. And so the struggle for gay identity is both a struggle for pride, for forwardness, but it's also a struggle against the narrow boxes of labeling. You know, we hear a lot, I think, Robert, about what we call intersectionality. And some of us use the term as a positive thing, and then there are people out there who use it as a negative thing. But as a valuable tool for understanding the social world, one of the things it reminds us of, and people don't always remember this, you know, I don't know if it was invented, but it's certainly one of the first places it was used by social theorists was to talk about the experience of Anita Hill, right? Because what Anita Hill went through, she went through both as a woman and as a Black woman. And the civil rights struggle, in a way, wasn't directed on her behalf necessarily. And feminism, kind of bourgeois white feminism, was also not necessarily her ally. She had to find her own space, and we had to define her in her own space. And I feel so much the same way about Rustin, because when I study Rustin's life, when I think about his words and his contribution, it's plain that he was always struggling for his own intersectionality, for being able to say, yes, I am a black man. I think he said, am I right, Robert, at one point, I've been arrested 25 times in my life, 24 times for being black and once for being gay. That he was struggling to put forward both identities and not to allow the intersection in which he found himself to be censored or obliterated or denied. And let's be honest, right? Because part of the truth about the civil rights struggle in the early 1960s was that, heroic though it was in its war for the inalienable rights of minorities, of black men and women, heroic though that struggle was, it was not at that point particularly friendly to the struggle for gay rights and the struggle for homosexual identity, which at that point was still largely invisible. And I'm sure you know, because it's very much part of the record, that many of the people who were close to Dr. King in the early 1960s were very hostile to Bayard Rustin, exactly because they said, as one of Dr. King's intimates, the man we admire for his role, the struggle for human freedom, said Rustin is only good for organizing a movement of homosexuals. Now, he meant that as a total put down, as the worst thing you could say at that point. And that kind of blindness, and of course we see it as, yes, exactly, Rustin's skills as an organizer, as an inspiring figure, as the troubling angel we all want to be, were equally well directed towards the struggle for black freedom and the struggle for gay rights. 2 points I want to take from that. One is that in that sense, paying attention to other people's intersectionality is a way of seeing them as wholes, as human wholes, not in narrow boxes. And the other thing is, it's hard for us looking back at that moment in the early 1960s not to be shocked, to be aghast at what had happened and what was happening. When someone as heroic and engaged in the struggle as Rustin was excommunicated for a significant period of time because he was gay, excommunicated from the struggle, came back in heroically and as we all know, organized the March in Washington. But it should also be a reminder to us, not just to point a finger at the moral failings and the blindness, the opacity of people then, but to remind us that we're all likely to be opaque about someone else's struggle. That as we pursue the causes that we understand, we risk being blind to other and equally worthy causes, which is a way of saying, when I, in the book, 1,000 Small Sanities, when I was trying to define what liberalism, as I understand it, what the right, the radical form of liberalism, radicalism of the real, to use a term I know you like, that I'm proud to have coined, is exactly, it's the knowledge that reform is necessary and reform is never finished. That at every time when we engage in a program of social reform to enlarge our spheres of equality or to increase the possibilities of human freedom, there will always be another struggle waiting for us. The struggle will never be finished. Reform is inevitable and it's necessary and it's ongoing. And that's one of the ways in which the liberal tradition, of which Rustin is such an inspiring figure, liberal in its total commitment to nonviolence, liberal in the way that Rustin defined, and that I quote in the book, constitutional means, nonviolent measures, democratic procedures, and everything we do, constitutional means, nonviolent measures, democratic procedures. How that tradition of liberalism is always ongoing and always redefining itself. And one of the things that I think we've seen in my own lifetime in the development of Pride Week and everything it represents is its expansion. You know, I have a good friend, wonderful comedian named Judy Gold, and she likes to joke about the endlessly expanding initials. She herself is gay, lesbian, proudly so, in a wonderful relationship. And she talks about, it's GLBQ, XTR, and so on. And of course, we can smile at that. It's funny. But at the same time, we have to recognize that the additional initials all represent struggles for reform that at one point we were too blind to see, and that now we've literally expanded our vision, and our horizontality of initials has grown along with it. And I think that that's one of the truths. I think that's one of the truths about the struggle for gay rights, the struggle for pride, that it's a struggle that can't be separated from all the other civil rights struggles. And that if there's a lesson in our hero, Bayard Rustin's life, it's exactly that anytime we try to compartmentalize any one groups or any one identities or any one part of the struggle for human rights, whether it's the Jewish struggle against oppression, the Black struggle against segregation and apartheid, the gay struggle against the narrowing of their humanity, we commit a fundamental sin.
So one of the things I have to remember for when you come on, because we're so thrilled to have you each month, what an honor it is to have you, my friend. I have to take notes. I have to because now I have a lightning round of all these things that I want to say. I have to pull at all these threads. First of all, you are the quintessential New Yorker, because I want to tell our audience out there, and I'm sure there are a lot of people like, Adam keeps saying Pride Week, and Pride Week, doesn't he know it's Pride Month? But as a New Yorker, you know it is Pride Week, because in New York, it's Pride Week.
It is.
Right, and the rest of the nation, we celebrate Pride Month, but New York's like, this is Pride Week, and we're putting it all in this one bit of.
We're too busy. We only get one day for every other ethnic group and good cause, right? So we think of Pride Week, but I will happily genuflect to Pride Month.
No. I think that's wonderful. It brings that perspective, and that's where it all began. Stonewall, and Pride began as a riot. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a few minutes. I also want to, you raise up Bayard's name in such reverence and respect, and bring even more dimension to a man who, it seems just every day there's something more to learn, there's something more to be inspired by. This is the man who was the godfather of intersectionality, a good 2 decades plus before Kimberly Crenshaw even coined the term.
Before Crenshaw coined the term, I believe Crenshaw coined the term in the context of the Anita Hill struggle. I mean, not narrowly there, but I think it was part of the crucible. But yes, that's exactly right.
And I want to say that the other thing that Bayard did that's so magical is brought us together, because it was my in with you when I read the book and was so inspired. I was like, hey, you know what? We're the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, and he seems to play a big part in this little book you've written. We'd love to have you on. And there was no way we were getting any sort of notice from you if we didn't have that name. So Bayard is always working his magic, even now.
Well, because your choice of that name, if I may return a compliment, Robert, was so courageous, insightful, because Rustin, as we know, though one of the greatest Americans, is not universally recognized. He gives us a bunch of hard tasks, right? It's not all theater and rhetoric in Rustin. It's about, how do you charter the buses? How do you make the sandwiches to get 100,000 people to Washington to listen to Dr. King and to give his speech? That's the hard part of social activism. The easy part is the slogans and the speeches. The hard part is bringing the people with the sandwiches to hear the speeches and act afterwards. Interesting thing, talking about Stonewall. One of the things I wanted to bring up tonight, because it's always struck me as important. I was once making New York. You're absolutely right. I'm a provincial person who sees things through a narrow New York lens. I hope my sense of New York is expanding. I did a piece about the reopening of New York not long ago in the New Yorker, and I made sure that we were in every borough and every part as we came along, and I got to discover the best ribs in the Bronx, along with other things. Point I was going to make is that I once was doing a little documentary about New York, actually for the BBC. This is a decade ago or more. And I interviewed the great Tony Kushner, author of Angels in America and A Light Called Day, and and Lincoln, the Steven Spielberg movie, so many other extraordinary things. And we were talking about Stonewall and what had caused Stonewall. And he said something that I'll always remember. He said, people, including gay people, have sometimes tried to write out of the history of Stonewall the reality that it was, I think, the day after Judy Garland died, or the day after Judy Garland's funeral. He said, and sometimes we're not sufficiently proud of that because that seems like it speaks to a gay stereotype, right? Oh, gay men were upset because one of their icons, Judy Garland, had died. He said, but that's not something we should be ashamed about. That's part of what we should feel positively about. We had an aesthetic. We had a set of heroes and heroines, and we were told to be ashamed of that. Oh, you, Judy Garland, right? Over the rainbow. No accident that it's the flag of the occasion. That's the gay anthem. So a lot of shaming going on about that attachment and that allegiance and the overwhelming feelings of grief and indignation when she died. And I'll always remember Tony saying that to me. He said, that was one of the triggers, to use a contemporary word, of Stonewall. And it's not something we should write out of the history. It's something we should write into the history because it matters. And it's part of the affirmation of our own culture and our own cultural identity. And I've never forgotten that. And I, learned from that one of the things that's, we never should overlook in the struggle is not just the narrow, self-evidently virtuous parts of any cultural identity, but all the parts that we can be made fun of or be shamed about. And I think that that's a significant part of every minority struggle to be seen and to be heard, that we don't always have to be dressed up, and it's very much true about Pride, in ways that mimic or are pleasing to the majority group. We can affirm our own idiosyncrasies and cultural eccentricities, if you like, in a way that frees us from feeling that they're secondary or minor.
That brings me to thinking about, there was a huge debate about Pride, and there always is, about how kinky should it be, and
Exactly.
right, and do we tamp it down for the general public and for the families and for the worst of it all, the corporations and the sponsorships.
Exactly.
And there's a raging debate, of folks saying we need to be who we are, and this is one of the only times we get to be who we are.
That's exactly why I raised that note that that one of the triggers, not the major one, but significant, was the death of Judy Garland, to say exactly what Tony Kushner was saying to me was, that's who we are. That's what we're about. We don't have to always appear. We don't have to pass, to use an old-fashioned term, right? We don't have to pass as part of the heterosexual majority. We're all the same. We're just like you, only a little bit different. We don't have to be that. We can affirm who we are, and we can be as campy or flamboyant as we choose to be, and we don't have to closet that. We don't have to keep that in the closet. And I think that's one of the things. I hadn't thought this through clearly before we started talking, Robert. But in a certain way, that's a lesson that I think that what should we call it? The gay liberation movement has taught other seekers of social justice, right? That it's perfectly possible to be who you are in all of its richness without sacrificing what you want. And I think that that's something that we've all learned from, and that we all can be inspired by.
You keep raising Tony Kushner's name, and I have to say that Angels in America was just such a pivotal piece of theater. And I remember seeing it on Broadway, and just how effective it was, and how affecting it was, and what a brilliant piece it was, and how it spoke to so many different pieces and parts of the community.
It's, I think, one of the 3 or 4 greatest American plays, or trilogies, and it's a shame in a way because those of us who were lucky enough to see it. I say this as I can like almost of a theater queen, because that's the sort of theater lover who lives for the theater. That it's one of the things that makes the theater so distinct. If you didn't see it on stage, you didn't really see it. There's a fine HBO series with Al Pacino and directed by Mike Nichols, and it's a good relic of the experience. But it was one of the great transforming experiences, and one of the things that made it so was Tony's ambition and readiness not to deal only with specifically the gay experience or the experience of AIDS, the crisis, the AIDS crisis, which in so many ways anticipated the health crisis we've all been going through, the pandemic crisis. But that Tony wanted to use that experience as a prism on the broader American experience. That's why it's called Angels in America. The angels are Mormon. They don't belong to New York City. And he wanted to expand that possible range of understanding and reference. And to my mind, one of the greatest figures in all of American literature is Tony Kushner's version of Roy Cohn, exactly because it captures all of the evil and all of the humanity. And we see somebody who is both profoundly evil and at the same time a human being who's been scarred and wounded by the denials and repressions in his own experience as like any other. I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the great works of American literature.
And I actually have not only that, but the poster for the show, it hangs in my office at Bayard Rustin Center for Socialist headquarters, and it's that great angel done by, if I'm not mistaken, Milton Glaser, who is such an incredible artist, and just as a great confluence of so many different folks working together to make this almost perfect or perfectly imperfect work of art.
I see our friend Chris has said something here in the chat that I want to speak to, if I may, Robert. He says, we do need to be authentic, but some of us rely on corporations for employment. So with that argument, I really hope to be inclusive and grow corporate culture. I see big corporate as the enemy, but for me, it's another means to connect with LGBTQ folks in life. And I think that's a terribly important point to make. And let me say, I've been around for a while now. I am approaching senior citizen status. I hardly believe it, but it's true. This is my 65th year to heaven this year. And one of the things that I've seen in my own lifetime, in my own working life, is how much more open, with all of its restrictions, all of its limits, corporate culture really has been to LGBTQ folks. When my first job in New York was at GQ magazine. I've written about this in my book, At the Stranger's Gate, where I became the grooming editor of GQ magazine, and I was the only straight man on a masthead made up entirely of gay men who were incredibly kind and welcoming to me, even though I was of a different orientation. And it was striking to me to see how, as I got to know those men more and more intimately, how their experience of the closet had changed, warped, shaped their lives, how willing they were to be out, how being out affected them. And one of the tragic truths of that piece of my own experience is that so many, I think almost 90% of the men I worked with such pleasure and learned so much from, were dead by the end of the decade of AIDS. But I think of this, and this is something I wanted to talk to you about tonight, I think of that in the context of something that's extremely close to me. As you know, Robert, the book I wrote, 1,000 Small Sanities, is a letter to my daughter, Olivia, about liberalism and about values. And I wrote it because on the night of Donald Trump's election, she was so traumatized, so frightened, and I wanted to affirm for her enduring liberal values as they came to us from everyone from John Stuart Mill to Frederick Douglass to Bayard Rustin and beyond. And Olivia, as you can imagine, is one of my favorite people. And I wrote this book for her and to her and with her in lots of ways, because we would sit morning after morning with coffee. She doesn't like the way I make coffee, so she would run out and get a Starbucks. And I would tell her what I was thinking about and what I was writing about, and she would respond and react, and we would record our back and forth, and I would try and turn it into writing. Well, Olivia went off to college, and about a year ago, she came out to her mother and me and said, I've come to realize that my identity is as a gay woman, as a lesbian. And the blessing for me, Robert, was that she was coming out in an environment and at a time when it was minimally disruptive to her life. She knew it wouldn't be disruptive to us. I was startled. I won't pretend I wasn't. For about 60 minutes, I didn't know that was her identity or sexual identity, but I was just delighted. And then it makes no difference at all. She has a wonderful girlfriend who we adore. And, but what made me brought tears to my eyes, I thought, everyone has struggled. So many people, I don't put myself in the forefront of that struggle, God knows, but the Rustins and the Kushners and so many other less named people struggled for so long for the possibility that that being gay was a function of your being human. And Olivia is coming into a world in which that's not perfectly true. That's not absolutely true. And it's not uniformly true across the United States, but it's largely true. It's more true than it's ever been before in American history, and in some respects than in human history, for someone to announce a same-sex sexual orientation, to be proud and to come out as gay, and to have it be a human choice rather than a human dilemma. So I asked Olivia's permission, because it isn't something that I've talked about before anywhere, to mention it and talk about it tonight with you, Robert, and with all of our friends on the Power Hour. And I wanted to ask her permission, because exactly for the reason that we were talking about before about Marcel Proust. It's not our job to out other people. It's not our right to appropriate other people's experience. So I asked her permission, and she said, of course, tell people, talk about it. I have no ambiguous or ambivalent or any feelings about it, except that it's a function of who I am. So when you read, if anybody wants to, 1,000 Small Sanities now, it's a reminder that in this dialogue between father and daughter, which shapes the book, there was a subtext that the father was unaware of, that the daughter, in a sense, I think was in some large part unaware of at the time. She needed to go away to figure it out. And once again, it's a reminder that our understanding of other people is always partial, and it's always going to be redefined for us. And that the great moral adventure of liberalism that has enabled young women like Olivia to be bold and frank about their sexual identity in ways that were not available to their mothers or grandmothers' generation. That's something that, with everything else that's wrong in the world, we should take, to use the right word, we should take pride in that, Robert, and I take immense pride. Not just that Olivia is who she is, but that Olivia is coming into a world that the forces of angelic troublemakers have made one that's for the first time welcoming to sexual minorities.
What's amazing about what you just said is that, and I know that you don't take compliments well. I know that you have tremendous modesty about all that you've done and all that you've accomplished and all that all of us that you've inspired. But you've created that safe space in two ways. As a father, in your familial unit, obviously by your words of love and respect that you just shared with us. But you've also created it to a greater extent through your writing. And that's an amazing thing that you've done, this dual creation of safe spaces for your own family, and for this community at large. And I just want to, this is a perfect opportunity to say again, to show this book, because this book is full of highfalutin ideals and huge principles and big brain-busting ideas. But it's also so human. And everything you just said is on every page of this book. So I cannot recommend enough to our viewing audience to pick up a copy of this book. And our wonderful volunteer, Chris, who's in the comments section, is giving you a link right now. This is our bookshop.org. We love bookshop.org because they give back to independent bookstores. Go buy a copy for yourself. Go buy a copy for a friend. Go buy a copy for an enemy. You'll become a friend. And most especially, last bit of salesmanship, call your local library. Make sure they have a copy of this book, because although we want everyone to support Adam and support this wonderful book, not everybody can afford to buy every book or any books for some folks. And their local libraries, how they are able to be inspired by, able to be experiencing, able to be introduced to ideas such as this. So please do consider that.
Thank you, Robert. I deeply appreciate your kind words and your support. It is true that the point, if the book has one point, it's exactly that the abstract seeming ideas of philosophers and political theorists only have value and are only lucid to us when they enter specific human lives. And that's, I didn't begin the book by writing about, Montesquieu's theory of the social contract or Locke's theory of the checks and balances necessary to democratic government, valuable and honorable though those things are. I began it with the great liberal philosopher John Stuart Mill and his greatest teacher, Harriet Taylor, and their desperate struggle to find a life for themselves because she was married and he was not, and how their struggle to express their own love while at the same time respecting the lives and the constraints that her children and others presented was for me a model of the liberal search for pluralism, compromise in the most positive sense, and so on. So throughout the book, I tried to illuminate it with those examples. I do think it's true that nothing ever comes fully alive to us until we confront it in our own lives as immediate experience. And I do think it's true. And I think when the actual history of our time is being written, one of the really striking things that you will see is that many politicians and many justices, some on the Supreme Court, I suspect, have been instructed by their own children, not just by their own children's values, but by having gay children in truth. Even someone as, to my mind, as deeply objectionable as Dick Cheney clearly had his mind shaken, a little like Scrooge on Christmas night, by having Mary Cheney in his life. And I know Liz Cheney, not my prime vote getter in my New York City ballot, but an honorable woman who spoke out against the worst of the insurrection and the assault on democracy. Those things are transformative. And I think that when we feel them in our lives, they're deeply transformative. And the only other thing I'd add is, is that to the degree that I've been able to make a safe space, it's because other people go before us. I know that's the biggest cliche in our world and in our field, that we owe so much to the people who came before us, but we really do. We really do. The space that's carved out that allows someone like my daughter Olivia, not that there's anyone else quite like her, to call her dad and say, "Hey, Dad, I wanted to talk to you. I've really come to realize that I'm gay, that I really like company of other women most. That's really what I'm drawn to, and it's really wonderful. I just feel so good about this." And to be able to say, "That's fabulous, babe. I'm so pleased for you. I'm so happy." That's not some magic thing that I have. It's because so many people have gone before us to open it up. Her brother, Luke, his middle name is Auden, after W.H. Auden, the great gay poet, hardly a narrowly gay poet, though his great poem, Stop All the Clocks, became very much, as you recall, kind of the anthem of the funeral anthem, the elegiac anthem of the AIDS period. And Auden struggled, and one of the reasons we named Luke Auden was because I so valued Auden's struggle to find his own identity as a Christian, as a poet, and as a gay man, and his struggle to incorporate all of those elements into his life remains enormously moving. So none of us would be here without them that came before. And let's also add, because it came up in our conversation tonight, let's be charitable to those that came before. You know, when I said a moment ago, and I want to say it again, because I think it's so important when we think about where we're going to look at where we've been. A lot of the people who were involved in the civil rights movement in the early 60s were not, as we both know, sympathetic to Bayard Rustin's gayness. They didn't see it as part of the same struggle. They had to be educated. It was a painful education for a lot of them, that this was one struggle and that a movement for homosexuals was part of the civil rights movement, not something apart from it. But they had their own struggle to make. They had to understand that. It was hard for them. It was hard for a lot of them. And we should be charitable to them and then look in our own souls and see who we're not vibrating towards, who we're not seeing as part of our own moment and as part of our own struggle. Who are we leaving out? And that's the valuable lesson to be learned from something like Rustin's inability, the fact that people rejected Rustin from the civil rights struggle, excommunicated him at one point for being gay. It's not to condemn those people. It's to learn and say, what are we missing? Where are our blinders? Who are we blind to? What struggle are we blind to? One of the people, someone who read and liked the book, came to visit me, a kid from California. And his struggle was the struggle against factory farms, struggle for against cruelty to animals, and indeed against animal eating at all. Came and sat in my living room, Robert, and said, your book really was an inspiration to me in this struggle. He's running, I think he did run, for mayor of Berkeley, California, on an anti-animal cruelty platform. Wonderful guy. And I was startled because it's not a subject that comes up in 1,000 Small Sanities at all. The struggle against the factory farm, the struggle against slave farming, so to speak. I use that word in heavy quotes, but against the horrors of the industrialization of meat, which leaves so many sentient animals suffering so unduly. But I was delighted because I said, that's a place, been a blind spot of mine, right? And he was inspired by all the tales I was weaving of other people's struggles to apply it to something that he saw as the forward-stepping moral cause. And that was very educational to me. It was not something I included in the book explicitly. And I was so startled and glad to be told that it was implicit in the arguments I was making. So we never stop learning. We never stop expanding our vision. And that's one of the big differences I like to think, between radicals of the real and even the most admirable and sympathetic conservatives who we should honor and respect, because without a full gamut of opinion, we would not have a democracy. We believe that the processes of reform will never end, that every time we achieve some positive reform, another campaign of reform awaits us. We will never be done with the struggle, because the struggle is always expanding. And that's good. It means that the vectors of our compassion are growing ever greater. Our struggle against cruelty is growing ever more intense. That's good. But that's what separates our kind from the other. And I know we can seem funny comics sometimes, right? People say, liberals can never decide if their favorite word is compulsory or forbidden. And we can be funny that way, sure. We're always looking for the next cause. I see that. But you know what? That's a good thing. It means, as I said, circles of compassion are expanding.
And I think that's the perfect note, as always, to unfortunately, our hours always go so quickly. And you talk about your daughter, and you talk about her coming out. And I remember it was the great Raquel Willis, who we had the honor of having on the show, trans activist, one of the organizers of that great Black Trans Lives Matter rally in Brooklyn that had tens of thousands of folks show up during the summer. And Raquel used the term, she said she prefers, instead of coming out, she prefers the term letting in.
Yes.
That is so indicative of what you were talking about, of even the most, strict Republicans and right-wing folks. When there's someone who lets them in, then there can be real change.
That's beautiful, Robert. That's a thing I will take away from tonight and use myself with credit, but I will use myself because that's a beautiful thing. It's not coming out, it's letting in. And that was exactly Olivia's attitude when she told us. It wasn't that she was coming out in a way that would startle us. She was letting us into the depths of her true personality. That's a beautiful thing. And thank you for sharing that with me.
Well, it so perfectly sums up what you do too, because you take a bike ride in Central Park. You walk the city for 7 hours at a time, and you let all of that into yourself. But then you come back and you write the words and you write the pieces and you give us that opportunity to be let into what you do. And I'm sure that's why Olivia was so comfortable, because that's what you've done your entire career. And now I see in your life as well.
Well, that's nice of you to say, Robert. I will add that Olivia has watched us on the Power Hour on a couple of occasions. So she was really cool about saying, this is where I want you to let me in, will be on the Power Hour. So
much love and respect, Olivia, and we're thrilled that we were able to share your story tonight. It was very meaningful, and I want you to know that there are so many folks watching. There are hundreds of folks watching right now, and I know that most of them are virtually shy. But it's always after the show that I hear, and especially after you're on, honestly, my friend, that there have been words or moments that have inspired, that have been meaningful, that have folks will carry with them beyond this hour. So thank you. And I know that you have a very strict writing schedule. And then I know, speaking of family, that you are
cooking schedule as well,
waiting to be fed. And when I told Adam that we had a moment at the end of the show tonight, and I told him that he was able to be let off a couple of minutes early, he actually insisted on staying with us. And he wanted to stay with us because tonight I don't want to end on this is not a sad note. It is a sad note for me because I'm going to be very, very I'm going to miss our friend very much. But as we've talked about tonight, Chris has been in the comments section tonight and every single night since last August, almost a full year. And Chris is going to be taking his leave of us tonight to pursue his education and to further his journey. And we couldn't be more proud of him for doing that. We couldn't be more honored and inspired by what he has done for us and with us the past, as I said, 11 months. And it is not the end of our journey with him at the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, because I'm even more thrilled that Chris is going to take his experience and his life's journey to inspire others. And he is going to start with us a trans youth mentoring program, among other things. So we're thrilled at this next part of the journey. Although, Chris, I have to tell you that I am going to miss the holy heck out of you each and every night. You're like the Batman to my Robin. I feel like, as I've said many times, I feel like you live in the comment section. I just come to visit you, and I'm going to miss seeing you. So maybe you'll come back for a guest spot every now and then. But I just wanted to really be very robust and very clear and crystal in my thanks and gratitude for all you have done and all that you are, my friend. So much love and respect to Chris, our dedicated volunteer. We will miss you here at the Power Hour, but we look forward to your works that you will do with us in the near and far future, my friend.
Bon voyage, Chris.
And Adam, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything we share.
it's the one time of the month, Robert, when I feel I take a deep breath and I get to exhale ideas and preoccupations that have been with me. So thank you, my friend, and to the next.
To the next, indeed, my friend. And we look forward to each and every month. What a wonderful, wonderful thing you bring to us. And much love to your family. Be good, my friend.
Be good, Rob, friend.
So that is Adam Gopnik, everybody. He, I don't need to say any more. He speaks so eloquently and inspirationally for himself and for all of us. I will show you the book again because I really feel like you got to buy it. It's just, it's everything that he said tonight is in there and oh so much more. And it's a book you should have on your shelves because it's for you, it's for your family, it's for your friends. It's a way to see things so differently and be inspired in such a way that I cannot even express. So just go buy the freaking book, everybody. It's worth all of it. It really is. Thank you for being with us tonight. This is, as always, when Adam Gopnik is with us, a very special Power Hour, and this was no exception. In fact, this was one of my favorites. I hope one of yours as well. Thank you for joining us in virtual community tonight. Until tomorrow night, much love and respect, y'all. Please be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most importantly, and I promise you this, please take heed, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.